Riku Kurose expected the historian to leave Japan. He planned to dismantle her life in 48 hours. Instead, Dr. Naomi Mercer walked into one of his hotels, sat beneath a camera she knew belonged to him, and sent an encrypted file proving she had already mapped the operation used to silence her. What disturbed him was not that she had survived the pressure. It was that she had prepared for it before he ever noticed her. 3 days earlier, Naomi had still been attached to Yokohama International University as a visiting researcher. Her office was narrow, temporary, and deliberately unremarkable. 1 desk, 2 metal shelves. A secure external drive kept inside a gray document case. The university had given her access to municipal records, defunct corporate registries, and several private collections connected to post-war commercial networks. Officially, her project concerned the transition of criminal organizations into legitimate enterprise. Unofficially, everyone who mattered knew which organization she was studying: the Kurose. By the late 1990s, the syndicate had controlled protection rackets, shipping routes, private lending, and a large portion of port security around Yokohama. 28 years later, the criminal side had contracted, but the money had not disappeared. It had moved into logistics, insurance, property, risk consulting, and private security. The family described that transition as reform. Naomi's archive suggested it had begun with a massacre. The accepted version of the 1998 purge was simple enough to survive repetition. A rival faction struck first. Hideo Kurose retaliated. The family consolidated power afterward. Naomi had spent 4 years finding the parts that did not fit. Companies registered before the violence became public. Properties transferred too quickly. Witness statements altered in later copies. Executives appearing in corporate records days after rivals lost control of their holdings. She did not yet have the evidence to publish the conclusion she suspected. That distinction mattered to her. It did not matter to Riku. He first read her name in a 12-page internal briefing placed on his desk at 6:20 on a Monday morning. "Academic?" he asked. His security chief, Daiichi Mori, nodded. "British passport, Jamaican family background, 34. No criminal affiliations we can confirm. No activist groups, nothing relevant. Political connections, minimal." Riku turned another page. Naomi Mercer had published on organized crime archives in Naples, Glasgow, and Kingston. She had testified twice in civil proceedings concerning disputed corporate provenance. Her work had damaged reputations before, but never by accusation alone. Riku stopped at that line. She waits until she can prove something. That seems to be the pattern. He closed the file. Instead, he concluded that it made her predictable. She depended on institutions, universities, publishers, grants, archives, professional credibility. Remove those and the work lost oxygen. "Do not threaten her," Riku said. Daiichi looked at him. "Not directly. Make the university reconsider the fellowship. Review the foundation funding, and find out who approved her lease." Daiichi understood. Riku returned to another file before Naomi Mercer had even finished her first coffee. First came the fellowship cancellation. A deputy dean entered Naomi's office at 11 and used several phrases that had been prepared by lawyers. Changing institutional priorities, concerns about source verification, potential exposure. The university would honor her access badge until Friday. The research appointment ended immediately. Naomi listened without interrupting. When he finished, she asked, "Who raised the concern? I'm not at liberty to discuss internal review." "Was there an internal review?" His pause answered her. Naomi packed nothing. She only closed the document on her screen. She wrote down the exact time he had entered. By 5 that evening, the property management company for her apartment informed her that the owner intended to reclaim the unit for personal use. The notice was legally aggressive and procedurally suspicious. The next morning, her grant administrator in London called to say funding had been frozen pending an ethics review. "What complaint? I haven't been shown it. Who filed it? We don't know." Naomi looked through the glass wall of the university library. A man in a charcoal jacket, had been seated in the same place for 40 minutes without opening the book in front of him. She ended the call. At noon, Professor Kenzo Ishibara published a statement questioning her methodology in an academic forum, widely read by Japanese historians. That one interested her. Ishibara had never read her unpublished archive, yet his criticism referenced 2 categories of evidence she had discussed only in closed meetings. She read his statement twice. Then she opened a spreadsheet she had built 6 months earlier. Riku learned of her reaction through reports. No panic, no urgent ticket purchase, no calls to police, no appeal to the university president. At 7:14 that evening, Daiichi entered his office. She has not left. Riku signed a document without looking up. She will. She moved some equipment where we lost the courier. That got Daiichi's full attention. You lost him. He changed vehicles beneath the Shin Yokohama station. We found the first driver. Mercer had booked the transfer under another name 3 weeks ago. Riku set down his pen. 3 weeks. Yes. The pressure campaign had started yesterday. Naomi had arranged contingencies before it even existed. Riku still did not regard her as dangerous, but he stopped regarding her as ordinary. The following morning, Naomi entered the Kurose Grand Yokohama at 9:07. It was one of the family's most profitable legitimate properties. Business travelers, foreign executives, political fundraisers, discreet private meetings. She wore a dark coat over a plain cream blouse and carried no visible luggage. The receptionist asked whether she had a reservation. No. A meeting. Naomi chose a chair in the main lobby, beneath a decorative brass light fixture. She placed her phone on the low table, looked once toward a black glass panel near the ceiling, and waited. The camera behind that panel belonged to Kurose Security. 16 minutes later, Riku received a message from the hotel manager. Mercer is here. He opened the live feed. Naomi did not look distressed. That irritated him more than fear would have. Send someone down, Daiichi said. No. Riku watched her unlock her phone. His own device vibrated. An encrypted email had arrived from an address his systems had never seen. The subject contained only 4 words. You missed the foundation. He opened it. There were 11 attachments. Bank transfers, board memberships, tax filings, donation records, a consultancy agreement. Professor Ishibara's name appeared repeatedly through organizations connected to the Kurose Cultural Preservation Foundation. Not direct payments. Nothing so crude. Honoraria, advisory retainers, research sponsorships, 6 years of them. The final page was a diagram connecting those payments to the statement released against Naomi less than 24 hours after her grant was frozen. Daiichi leaned over the screen. She built this overnight. Number Riku continued. The final attachment contained a short message. You can damage my credibility. You cannot make me dependent on it. Below that was a timed release protocol. 6 journalists, 4 countries, multiple encrypted repositories. If Naomi failed to authenticate herself on schedule, the archive would distribute automatically. Riku read the mechanism twice, not because he doubted it, because he wanted to find the bluff. He found none. Can we stop the release? Daiichi hesitated, not without knowing where all copies are. Do we know number Riku looked back at the hotel feed. Naomi was reading, not watching for guards, not searching the room. Reading. He called the hotel manager, put her in conference room 7. Naomi entered 12 minutes later. Riku arrived through the private elevator. It was their first meeting. She stood beside the window with the city behind her. She had chosen the spot for a clear view of both doors. Riku noticed. Naomi noticed him noticing. You attacked the wrong weakness, she said. Riku took the chair across from her. You assume this was an attack. My fellowship disappeared. My funding froze. My landlord became sentimental about family property. Professor Ishibara discovered concerns about research he has never seen. Perhaps Japan dislikes your work. Japan didn't coordinate the timing. Riku studied her for several seconds. You came prepared. I came informed. Different things, not today. There was no smile between them, but the conversation had already changed. Riku had entered expecting to determine the terms. Now he needed information she possessed. "Who gave you the internal material?" Naomi's expression did not alter. "So that's the part bothering you." "Answer the question." "No." He expected defiance. He had expected defiance. Her refusal was instead painfully procedural. Not emotional, not reckless. A boundary she had established long before meeting him. Riku shifted strategy. "You can continue your research." "I was already going to." "With access." That caught her attention. "Access to what records you currently do not have. And in return, I see what concerns us before publication. You do not edit it. I did not say I would. You do not veto it. No, you do not touch my source archive." A pause. Riku looked at her. Limited transparency. That phrase usually means surveillance with good tailoring. For the first time, something like amusement crossed his face before it disappeared. "Call it whatever helps you accept it." Naomi picked up her phone. "I haven't accepted anything." She reached the door, then stopped. On a side cabinet near Riku's hand lay an old photocopy Daiichi had brought from internal storage. The corner carried a faded circular seal, obsolete for more than 20 years. Naomi glanced at it only once, but Riku saw recognition flash across her face. "You know that mark," he said. She looked back at him. "I know archival notation." "That isn't archival notation." Naomi held his gaze. Then she left. Riku did not stop her. 5 minutes later, he told Daiichi to start a trace. Find any living person who might have supplied Naomi with internal Kurose records. By midnight, the first report came back. No current employee matched, no former accountant fit, no known rival source explained the material. Daiichi placed one final page on Riku's desk. "There's another problem." Riku read it. Some of Naomi's documents had been copied years before she began studying the Kurose organization. Years before her fellowship. Years before anyone in Japan had reason to know her name. Riku looked again at the list of dates. It wasn't who had targeted Naomi that mattered anymore. Someone inside the Kurose world had been preparing for her kind of investigation long before she arrived. By the next morning, Riku had stopped asking who Naomi Mercer knew. He started asking what she knew before she should have known it. The difference changed the way he handled her. At 9, Naomi received a temporary access badge for a private Kurose records facility beneath an administrative building near the port. It did not open every door. It opened enough to make the invitation clear. Riku was keeping his bargain. That did not make her trust him. She entered with a laptop, 2 notebooks, and no expectation of privacy. Daiichi Mori met her at the elevator. "You understand nothing, leaves this floor without review. Then, review the copies I request. No photography. I didn't ask. No external drives." Naomi handed him the gray document case she had carried since arriving in Japan. "Seal it." Daiichi looked at her, then at the case. "You trust us with it?" "No, that's why I want your signature across the seal." For the first time, he seemed unsure whether she was being difficult or simply thorough. He signed. Riku watched the exchange from farther down the corridor. The archive had originally been designed for legal defense, not historical research. Old financial ledgers sat beside internal memoranda property deeds and insurance settlements. Photocopies of records no one expected an outsider to understand had been left intact. Naomi did. Within an hour, she stopped at 3 corporate registrations from 1998. Kurose Maritime Risk, Tatsumi Storage Holdings, Seihoku Property Services. All 3 had been incorporated within weeks of the purge. Riku stood across the table while she compared dates. "You already knew these companies existed," he said. "I knew when they appeared. That isn't the same thing, Nasper." She turned one document toward him. "The question is what they owned before they existed." Riku read the asset list. Warehouses, land, 2 insurance portfolios. Most had belonged to companies associated with men later described in Kurose histories as enemies eliminated during the factional conflict. The official narrative claimed consolidation happened afterward. These transfers suggested preparations had begun before the violence was over. Riku said nothing for several seconds. Naomi closed the file. That's why I'm here. To prove we stole assets. To determine whether the massacre was followed by opportunistic acquisitions or designed around them. That distinction matters to you. It should matter to you. He looked at the documents again. For years, Riku had treated 1998 as a story inherited from older men, betrayal, retaliation, survival. Naomi was turning it into accounting. He disliked how much more convincing accounting could be. His phone vibrated. Daiichi spoke briefly from the other end. Riku's expression didn't change. He pushed the file back toward Naomi. I have to leave. She watched him gather nothing. What happened? Warehouse fire. Accident? We don't know. You're telling me that because you'll hear about it anyway. Then he left. By afternoon, Naomi had learned the answer from public reports. A Kurose-controlled warehouse in Kawasaki had been sabotaged overnight. Nobody had been killed. Expensive cargo was destroyed, and several employees were injured during the evacuation. The first rumor blamed a Saionji-linked logistics crew. The second claimed Kurose captains were already preparing retaliation. Naomi expected the archive to close. Instead, Daiichi told her she could continue working. That surprised her more than the sabotage. Riku returned near dusk. His tie was gone. His sleeves were rolled once at the forearms. He carried a paper folder instead of his phone. You're still here? You gave me access until 6. It's 6:20, then your security is inefficient. He ignored that and placed the folder on the table. Inside were preliminary incident reports. Naomi looked up. These are current. Yes. You're showing me internal security material. I'm showing you why the archive remains open. She read. The suspected Saionji connection rested on one witness identification and a vehicle registration linked indirectly to a contractor. Not enough for certainty. What did your people want? Retaliation. And I refused. Naomi studied him. Because the evidence is weak. Because weak evidence costs more when men are eager to believe. That answer changed how she saw him more than any display of authority would. She had assumed his restraint was tactical. It was, but tactics still required choosing which consequences were acceptable. You lost something by refusing, she said. Riku gave her a brief look. 2 captains walked out of the meeting. That wasn't my question. No, it was your conclusion. He took the reports back. For the first time, Naomi realized his power inside Kurose wasn't absolute. Every decision cost someone loyalty. Every refusal created a record. Riku turned toward the door. Mercer. She looked up. You were right about the transfers. He left before she could answer. The next reveal came 2 days later. Naomi found it in a box no one had properly cataloged. Several photocopies carried handwritten marginal notes that did not match the official archive numbering. Dates had been rewritten in blue-black ink. Cross-references pointed toward legal files stored outside the main system. Riku saw her pause. You recognize the notation. I recognize a method. Whose Naomi continued reading. Professor Elias Ward. The name meant nothing to Daiichi. It meant something to Riku. He had seen it in the intelligence report. Your doctoral advisor. My mentor, he worked in Japan. Briefly. That isn't what our records say? Then your records are incomplete. Riku pulled out the chair opposite her. What did he do? Naomi considered refusing. Instead, she chose a smaller truth. He advised prosecutors on organized crime structures, mostly corporate fronts, asset transfers, and political exposure. When 15 years ago. And then he stopped. Why I don't know everything. It was not the answer Riku wanted, but it was the first time she admitted uncertainty instead of putting up a wall. He believed her. That mattered. Later that afternoon, Naomi uncovered testimony connecting a senior Kurose executive to a series of illegal acquisitions. The witness account was detailed. The supporting evidence was not. Daiichi expected her to photograph the reference number. Instead, Naomi crossed the allegation out of her working draft. "You're removing it?" he asked. "I can't verify it. It damages us. That doesn't make it true." Riku, standing near the shelving behind her, heard the exchange. He said nothing, but when Naomi requested access to a restricted corporate registry the following morning, approval arrived within minutes. Not trust. Not yet, but a negotiation had begun to replace suspicion. That fragile progress lasted until Riku reviewed her index. He was searching for ward references when he noticed the gaps. Every major Kurose figure from the late 1990s appeared somewhere. Masato, Hideo. 3 captains long retired, 2 accountants, Akemi Kurose, but not Riku. He searched again. Nothing. School records placed him in one location. A family chronology placed him somewhere else. One photograph roster skipped a line where his name should have appeared. A transport log contained a blank beside an age that matched his. This was not absence. It was removal. He found Naomi in the reading room. "Why did you erase me?" She looked up slowly. Riku placed the printouts in front of her. "You removed references to my childhood?" Naomi read the first page, then the second. She did not deny it. "You think I did it first? I think you know why." Her hand rested beside the paper. Riku noticed the blue-black annotation on one photocopy, the same ink used throughout Ward's notes. Naomi said, "Some false records exist because someone needed them to." That sounds convenient. It isn't, for whom she met his eyes. "I wasn't the first person who erased you." Riku looked down at the gaps again. The archive had stopped being a threat to his family's history. It had become evidence that someone had rewritten his own. And Naomi had known long before he did. By the time the first fragments of Naomi's research appeared online, Riku had already lost one ally over her. He had not expected to lose 2 more before the week was over. The leak was small enough to look accidental. 3 scanned documents appeared first on an anonymous financial forum. One showed a property transfer from a company associated with the 1998 purge. Another showed a Kurose-linked holding company acquiring the same asset days later. The third was a partial witness statement stripped of context. None of it was fabricated. That was what made it useful. By noon, the documents had been reposted by 2 business journalists. By evening, one television commentator was describing the Kurose Logistics Group as a criminal fortune disguised by paperwork. Naomi watched the coverage from the private archive. "Those scans didn't come from me." "I know," Riku said. She looked at him. "How?" "Because one page has a fold that isn't present in your copy." It was a minor detail, but it told him more than he intended. He had been studying her material closely. Perhaps too closely. Naomi returned to the screen. The leak did not expose the strongest evidence she had found. It exposed enough to create suspicion without allowing her to establish a complete argument. Someone understood the difference. Riku's phone vibrated again. He rejected the call. "Who benefits?" Naomi asked. "Everyone who wants us weaker." "That's not an answer. It's the answer until I know more." She turned toward him. "You already have a theory." Riku put his phone on the table. The academic who attacked you wasn't acting alone. Naomi had suspected that much. "What did you find?" His payments were routed through the Cultural Foundation, but the instruction came through an executive office, whose Riku did not answer immediately. That was enough. "Masato, my uncle's staff, you're protecting the distinction. I'm preserving it until I can prove otherwise." Naomi almost smiled. That sounds familiar. He ignored the comparison. Masato Kurose had been chairman long enough that many employees no longer separated the man from the organization. He appeared rarely in public delegated almost everything and had survived decades because he understood when to look inactive. The pressure against Naomi had not been a clumsy attempt to silence an outsider. It had been a controlled test. The anonymous leak made the purpose clearer. Masato did not need Naomi gone. He needed Riku compromised by her. The consequences arrived quickly. A European insurer requested clarification regarding several Kurose historical holdings. A bank delayed approval on a refinancing package. One major logistics client froze contract negotiations pending an internal compliance review. The damage remained manageable, but it was spreading into parts of the organization that had nothing to do with Naomi's archive. That was the point. At the executive meeting that afternoon, Riku's opposition stopped being theoretical. "Shut the archive," Captain Jenda said. Riku sat at the far end of the long table. "How take the servers, and trigger distribution, then take Mercer. That changes nothing. It changes her willingness to cooperate." Riku looked at him. "No." Jenda leaned back. Another executive, Nishimura, spoke next. "We are losing business because you are protecting procedure. We are losing business because someone inside this building is leaking selectively. That does not make the historian harmless." "No," Riku said. "It makes panic expensive." The vote was informal but revealing. 3 executives voted to seize Naomi's equipment immediately. 2 negotiations. Riku blocked the proposal with authority from his strategic office. The problem wasn't whether he could. The problem was what it would cost. By evening, Nishimura resigned from one of Riku's subsidiary boards. Jenda withdrew support for a port security restructuring Riku had spent months building. The following morning, Riku learned that a 3rd executive had moved voting rights into Masato's block. Naomi still had her archive. He had created another. His margin inside Kurose was narrowing. Naomi learned it from Daiichi, not Riku. He lost control of Seihoku's security because of yesterday's vote, Daiichi said, while signing her access log. Naomi stopped writing. "Because of me. Because of the choice he made. That isn't what I asked." Daiichi capped the pen. "It is the answer." Riku arrived 20 minutes later. Naomi waited until Daiichi left. "You should have told me about Seihoku, about what keeping this open is costing you. It would not change the evidence. It changes the arrangement." "No." She stared at him. "You keep doing that." "Doing what?" "Deciding which information I'm allowed to factor into my own choices." Riku pulled out a chair but did not sit. "The moment you begin adjusting your research to protect my position, the archive becomes useless. That isn't your decision. It becomes my problem." "There. Again." He looked at her. Naomi pushed a file aside. "You keep calling it protection when what you mean is management." Riku's answer came without anger. "In my world, those things overlap. That doesn't make them the same." For once, he did not argue. He sat. For several seconds, he looked at the table rather than her. "When I was younger, I changed schools 6 times in 4 years. Naomi said nothing. No explanations. Different drivers, different apartments. Sometimes I would be told I was leaving after dinner and be somewhere else before midnight. Because of threats. So I was told." "You believed them?" "I believed the adults who controlled where I slept." There was no tragedy in the way he said it. That made the history more useful. Naomi understood what he was showing her. Not pain for sympathy, a mechanism. If someone decided for you long enough, she said you learned to call that safety. "Yes. And now you do it to other people." "Yes." The admission made her more cautious, not less, because it was easier to fight someone who believed they were unquestionably right. Riku looked toward the box containing Ward's notes. "You told me I was erased before you touched the records." Naomi did not answer. "Was Ward involved?" She opened one of the folders. "I don't know enough yet." "You know more than you're saying." "That is also true." He accepted that. It was the closest thing to trust either of them had offered. Later that day, Naomi found a witness statement linking a senior Kurose executive to illegal acquisitions made after the 1998 purge. The name was one she had wanted for months. The evidence was still incomplete. She removed the allegation from her working manuscript. Riku saw her do it. "You dislike him?" "Yes." "You could damage him with that?" "Yes. And you won't." "No." "Why?" "Because I'm not building a weapon. I'm building a record." That answer stayed with him. So did the way she closed the file before temptation could turn into justification. Their closeness remained narrow, but real. Then Riku destroyed it. Naomi discovered the breach late that evening. One of her encrypted backups showed an access event from a device inside the Kurose network. The timestamp matched a period when Riku had been alone in the archive. She called him. He arrived 23 minutes later. "You opened it." "Yes." No excuse. That almost made it worse. "You promised not to touch my source archive. I read one protected directory. You touched it. I did not alter or copy the files. You broke the condition. I needed to know whether the missing references to my childhood were connected to a current threat." "You needed to ask. You would have refused." "Yes." Riku spread his hands once. Then, I would still have needed the answer. Naomi stood. "That is exactly the problem." He watched her remove her credentials from the table. "Withdraw your security." "No." She stopped. "You do not get to decide that after this. Saionji-linked firms are purchasing Kurose debt. That is your business. They have also approached one of the intermediaries connected to the leaked documents. My archive is not theirs. They may disagree. And your answer is to keep me under guard. My answer is to prevent them from taking what you have." Naomi picked up her coat. "Protection I cannot refuse is just another cage." Riku did not follow her. This time, he had no argument that would make it untrue. That night, Naomi returned to the encrypted section of Elias Ward's archive. She had been trying to break its internal indexing system for almost 2 years. One of the blue-black annotations gave her a new key. A date, not a password. A date connected to the earliest false record concerning Riku. The file opened. Naomi read the first line, then read it again. Source authorization, Akemi Kurose. Riku's mother. At almost the same moment, Riku received a formal notice from Masato's office. Emergency executive session. Purpose review of strategic authority and conflict of interest. Naomi looked at Akemi's name on the screen. Riku looked at his uncle's summons. They had spent weeks trying to protect different things. Her archive, his organization, his past, her independence. Now all of them had entered the same conflict. Masato did not accuse Riku of betrayal. He accused him of judgment. That was more effective. By 9 the next morning, every executive with voting authority had received the same packet. It contained records of Riku's decisions concerning Naomi, copies of the blocked seizure order summaries of lost contracts, and a formal claim that his continued protection of her had compromised Kurose interests. The language was careful. No mention of attraction. No crude suggestion that a woman had weakened him. Masato framed it as governance. Riku had placed one researcher's autonomy above financial stability. He had refused retaliation after the warehouse sabotage. He had blocked internal intervention. He had allowed a hostile archive to remain active while banks were already reconsidering exposure. Each accusation was true in isolation. Together, they formed a different story. By noon, Masato had invoked an emergency succession clause. Riku's strategic authority was suspended pending council review. At the same time, Daiichi brought him a separate problem. 3 Kurose-controlled companies had begun transferring debt positions into special-purpose entities. Those entities were financed through Saionji-linked banks. Riku studied the structure once. Then again. This started before the leaks. Yes. How long? 6 weeks. That changed everything. The leaks had not created the financial pressure. They had prepared the excuse for a transfer already in motion. Masato was not defending Kurose from Naomi. He was using Naomi to justify restructuring Kurose into dependence. Riku called her. She answered on the 4th ring. "I found Akemi." The word stopped him. "Where in Ward's archive?" Riku said nothing. Naomi continued. "Not a photograph. Source authorization." He looked at the debt transfer diagram in front of him. "How much enough that you need to see it before the council?" "I'm coming." "No." He almost ended the call. Naomi spoke before he could. "If you come here now, Masato gets exactly what he wants. You abandon an emergency session over me. Riku looked toward the conference room doors. She was right. That made it worse. What do you propose? Give me 1 hour. For what? To determine whether your mother was hiding evidence or creating it. The distinction mattered. Riku sat down. 45 minutes. Naomi ended the call without agreeing. She worked inside Ward's protected archive with the discipline that had first irritated him. No assumptions. No emotional reconstruction. She followed authentication marks and handwriting changes. She tracked duplicated dates and the blue-black annotations across the Kurose files. The obsolete seal from Chapter 1 returned first. Ward had cataloged it as a private verification mark. Only 3 Kurose family members used it during the late 1990s. One was Akemi. The ink was next. Naomi had recognized it before because Ward's notes contained scans of Akemi's original annotations. It had been a signature. Then, Naomi opened the damaged photograph. She had kept it hidden for years because Ward had written only one word on the back. Wait. The photograph showed Ward standing beside Akemi, outside a university annex. Not lovers. Not conspirators posing dramatically. They were 2 adults looking beyond the frame. On the table between them sat a stack of Kurose documents. Naomi finally understood why Ward had removed himself from public research. He had not abandoned the investigation. He had moved it underground. The last encrypted note opened through a date key. It had been created from one of Riku's falsified school records. Naomi read it twice before calling him back. The council had already begun. Masato sat at the opposite end of the table. He looked composed enough to seem uninvolved in the outcome he had engineered. Riku's phone remained face down beside his hand. It vibrated once. He stood. Masato watched him. If this is Mercer, it is. A few men exchanged looks. Riku picked up the phone anyway. Naomi did not waste time. Your mother was the source. Nothing in Riku's posture changed, but his free hand stopped turning the pen between his fingers. Explain. She discovered Masato engineered the 1998 purge. Not just retaliation. He used it to remove rivals and internal opposition, then moved their assets through newly formed companies. Riku looked at Masato. His uncle was speaking quietly to legal counsel. Naomi continued. You were there, for part of the planning. That's impossible. No. The records saying it was impossible were manufactured. Riku's attention returned to the phone. By whom Akemi first? Ward later. The gaps, the missing school references, the contradictory chronology, the blank line beside his age. All the absences Naomi had refused to explain. They erased me. To protect you. Riku said nothing. Naomi's voice remained precise. Akemi believed that if Masato learned how much you remembered, you would become evidence. So she created a false history, placing you away from the family during the critical weeks. Ward built corroborating records around it. Riku looked again at his uncle. Masato seemed older than he had that morning. Not weaker, just suddenly easier to read. Why did you preserve it? Because exposing the false records before Masato lost control would have exposed why they existed. You decided I wasn't allowed to know? Yes. No apology, no excuse. That answer hurt more than a defensive one would have. Riku's voice dropped. And Ward. He left instructions. For you? Yes. What did they say? Naomi hesitated only once. If Riku ever gains enough authority to challenge Masato, give him the truth. Not before. Riku closed his eyes for half a second, then opened them. So that's what this was. What my archive access. The questions. The way you watched every decision I made. I needed to know whether your mother protected a man who would become her brother. Masato. Riku understood. Naomi had not come to Japan merely to expose Kurose history. Part of her work had been judgment. His. The realization should have destroyed what trust remained between them. Instead, it stripped away the last convenient lie. Neither of them had ever been neutral. Riku returned to the table. Masato looked at him. Are you finished? No. Riku placed the phone beside his folder. Then he opened the succession statute. Masato's expression changed for the first time. Riku turned to the provision governing emergency asset transfers. You invoked review based on threat to organizational continuity. I did. Then, all extraordinary transfers require disclosure to the expanded council until review concludes. Masato looked toward council. Too late. Riku had already sent the summons. 37 minutes later. Additional executives joined by secure conference link. Banking representatives, 2 minority shareholders from legitimate Kurose subsidiaries. Outside counsel, people Masato had never expected to see the structure in full. Riku displayed the current transfer map. Shell entities, Saionji financing, debt conversion, control provisions triggered on default. These transfers were initiated 6 weeks ago, Riku said. Masato did not deny it. They protect liquidity. They transfer dependency, temporary dependency, to Saionji. That created the first fracture in Masato's support. Not morality, self-preservation. The captains who had wanted Naomi silenced did not want Saionji holding their companies by the throat, but current records alone were not enough. Masato could still characterize the scheme as emergency finance. That was where Naomi entered, not physically, professionally. She released a verified historical dossier to selected legal and financial recipients, only the portions she could prove. No witness identities, no speculative accusations. Asset creation dates, original ownership records, corporate succession chains, Akemi's authentication marks, Ward's preserved copies. Those were the same companies Masato now claimed authority to transfer. They had first expanded through assets absorbed immediately after the 1998 purge. Riku supplied the present. Naomi supplied the pattern. Together, the argument became impossible to dismiss. Masato had built power through concealed ownership once. He was repeating the method now. The vote turned. First 2, then 3, then enough. Masato lost emergency authority before sunset. The transfers were frozen. Saionji financing collapsed with them. No one applauded. No one called it justice. The organization had simply realized that preserving Masato now cost more than removing him. Riku refused calls for internal retaliation. Instead, he authorized selected financial records to leave Kurose control and reach investigators through outside counsel. That decision cost him something he could not recover. The old rule that family matters stayed inside the family was finished. By evening, Masato no longer controlled operations, but Riku no longer controlled the organization he had saved. He found Naomi after midnight in the archive. The restored photograph of Akemi and Ward lay between them. For a long moment, neither touched it. "You decided when I was allowed to know my own life," Riku said. Naomi did not look away. "Yes." He waited for justification. She gave none. The crisis was over. Masato had lost. The transfers were dead. The archive had survived. But Riku now knew that the woman he had tried to control had been carrying the truth of his childhood. She had held it long before he knew her name. And Naomi knew that protecting someone from a truth could become another form of deciding for them. They had stopped Masato together. What remained between them could no longer survive by strategy alone. 3 weeks after Masato lost authority, the Kurose organization still existed. It simply no longer resembled the structure he had controlled. It started with the money. 2 subsidiaries failed regulatory review and were placed into restructuring. One port security company lost its largest contract after outside auditors traced ownership inconsistencies back to the 1998 asset transfers. Several senior captains left rather than submit to new disclosure rules. Others stayed. There was nowhere safer to go. Riku did not try to stop them. That surprised Daiichi more than anything. For years, Riku had treated fragmentation as failure. Every dispute he kept small until it died. Now he let certain pieces break. Some things he had learned got worse the longer they stayed. Masato remained alive, represented by lawyers. He was stripped of operational control and increasingly dependent on the same legal system he had spent years manipulating from a distance. There was no dramatic fall, No public spectacle. Just the steady removal of access. Accounts frozen. Board permissions revoked. Private offices reassigned. Calls no longer returned. His power had always depended on other people acting before he had to ask twice. Irrelevance became punishment enough. Naomi's consequences arrived more publicly. Her book was published 6 weeks later. The title avoided sensational language. So did the text. She documented the 1998 purge, the asset transfers that followed, and the corporate structures that had converted violence into legitimacy. She also published evidence of Riku Kurose's intervention, not as redemption for the family, as contradiction. The history had contained resistance inside the system, and Naomi refused to erase that simply because a cleaner narrative would sell better. She protected the names of several witnesses. She excluded 2 allegations she still could not verify, and she included Riku's later decisions without turning them into absolution. Some reviewers praised the rigor. Others accused her of compromised judgment. One academic journal described her proximity to Riku as an unresolved methodological concern. Naomi read the sentence once, then closed the review. She had expected worse. Professor Ishibara's position collapsed more quietly. The foundation payments were investigated. His criticism of Naomi remained technically his own opinion, but the undisclosed financial relationship made every word look purchased. He resigned from 2 advisory boards. Naomi never mentioned him publicly. He had been a tool, not the structure that used him. That distinction still mattered to her. The damaged photograph of Ward and Akemi was restored by a conservation specialist in Kyoto. When Naomi received it back, she did something she had refused to do for years. She cataloged it. No hidden drawer, no private envelope. The record identified both names, the approximate date, the university annex, and the documents visible between them. On the reverse side, Ward's single handwritten word remained legible. Wait. Naomi left it there. Not everything needed correction. Riku came to the archive 2 days later. It was no longer located beneath Kurose property. Naomi had leased a modest office inside a university research cooperative near Kanai. Metal shelving lined one wall. 2 restored terminals sat beneath a window. The security system belonged to the building, not to him. He arrived alone. Naomi noticed that before she noticed the envelope in his hand. No Daiichi. He has better things to do. That sounds unlikely. He said so, too. Riku placed the envelope on her desk. Inside was a formal offer. Several remaining Kurose executives wanted him to assume full leadership of what survived. Naomi read the first page. They want you back. They want continuity. That is not the same thing. No. The offer would have restored most of what he had lost. Not all of it, but enough. Control over the surviving syndicate structure, authority over security networks, influence over the legitimate companies still solvent. Months earlier, Naomi would have assumed he had already accepted. She put the document down. When do you answer? I did. She waited. I declined. No performance. No justification. Naomi looked at him more carefully. What are you keeping? 3 legitimate logistics companies. 1 security firm. Under what structure? Independent compliance. She almost laughed. Did saying that hurt a little. He took the chair opposite her. I can keep rebuilding the old structure, he said. Or I can admit that surviving it is not the same as deserving it. That was the first answer he had ever given her that did not sound like strategy. It changed something. Not because he had become harmless. He had not. Not because the Kurose name had been cleansed. It had not. Because he had been offered power and chosen less. No threat had forced him. No counsel had cornered him. No one was watching except her. Naomi closed the offer. That matters. I know. There was another envelope beneath it, smaller, older. Riku placed it between them. My mother's last encrypted file. Naomi did not touch it. You opened it? No. Why? Because I would have before. She understood. Before he would have opened it, first decided what was dangerous. decided what belonged to him, decided what she was allowed to see. "What do you want me to do with it?" she asked. "Whatever the record requires. That could include publication." Yes, it could change what people think about her. Yes, about you. Yes. Naomi studied him, and if I decide it should remain sealed, then I'll ask why. But you won't take it. No? That was the real answer. Not surrender. Trust with friction still intact. Naomi placed her hand over the envelope. "I'll review it." Riku nodded. Nothing more. There was one final matter neither had addressed. Her book was finished. Her original fellowship was gone. Her research no longer required her to remain in Japan. Riku knew that. He had not asked what she planned to do. That was deliberate. Naomi noticed that too. I was offered a position in London. He looked at her. When last week? You didn't mention it. I'm mentioning it now. He waited. No argument, no calculation about distance, no offer to arrange protection. That almost made the choice harder. I turned it down. Riku's expression changed only slightly. Why I accepted a 1-year appointment here. At the archive. Yes. He looked around the modest office. This place has terrible coffee. It also has no Kurose cameras. That was unnecessarily specific. It was extremely necessary. This time he smiled. Briefly. Naomi leaned back. I'm not staying because you need me here. I know. I'm not staying because I need protection. I know. And if you ever arrange my life behind my back again, I leave. Riku nodded once. That seems fair. It is not a negotiation. I know that too. Months later, the restored photograph of Akemi and Ward hung inside the archive in a climate-controlled display. Not prominently, correctly. One evening, Naomi sat at her desk while rain tapped lightly against the window. Riku arrived with 2 coffees and no escort. The final encrypted file still rested between them. Unopened. He looked at it. Ready? Naomi looked at him, then at the file. Together. Power had kept them alive, but trust was what finally allowed them to stay. Subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what you think really changed them.